This story is titled, I Refuse to Invite My Golden Child Brother to My Wedding. Then my parents made a shocking threat. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, growing up, it was impossible to ignore how differently my parents treated me and my younger brother Liam. I don't think I understood the term golden child back then, but looking back, that's exactly what he was. From the moment he was born, Liam was the star of the family, and I became the supporting character. Before Liam came along, things were different. I have faint but vivid memories of how it used to be. My parents would take me to the park every weekend, push me on the swings, and cheer me on as I clumsily tried to climb the jungle gym. They would read me bedtime stories, using silly voices to make me laugh, and proudly stick my crayon drawings on the fridge like they were masterpieces. I felt like I mattered to them, like I was special. But that all changed when Liam was born. At first, I thought the shift was normal. He was a baby, and babies need attention. But as Liam grew older, it became clear that he wasn't just the baby of the family. He was the family. Everything revolved around him. My parents doted on him, showering him with praise for every little thing he did. Meanwhile, I was just there. It wasn't like they hated me or anything, it was worse. They simply didn't see me anymore. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. For weeks, I had been dropping hints about wanting a bicycle. I even went as far as cutting pictures of bikes out of magazines and leaving them on the kitchen counter where my parents could see them. I imagined riding it around the neighborhood, feeling the wind in my hair and the freedom of finally having my own set of wheels. When my birthday came, I was bursting with excitement. I eagerly unwrapped my presents, only to find a pile of clothes and books. Don't get me wrong. I appreciated the gifts, but I couldn't hide my disappointment. I asked about the bike, and my parents said it was too expensive. I tried to hide how crushed I felt, and convinced myself they just couldn't afford it. But 2 weeks later, I came home from school to find Liam in the driveway, proudly riding a shiny new bike. He wasn't even asking for one. It was just a random surprise gift from my parents. When I asked why Liam got a bike and I didn't, they told me, Liam needs more exercise. You're fine without one. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't fine. I felt invisible. That wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern that repeated itself throughout our childhood. When I made the honor roll in middle school, my parents barely acknowledged it. I showed them my certificate, expecting at least a well done. Instead, my mom glanced at it, said, "That's nice, Sarah," and went back to watching TV. But when Liam got a B+ on a single math test, they acted like he had won a Nobel Prize. They took us out to dinner that night to celebrate, and I sat there, silently stewing, wondering why my achievements didn't matter as much. It got worse as we got older. When I turned 16, I got my first part-time job at a local bookstore. I loved that job. It felt so freeing to finally have my own money, and I started saving up for college. I'd dream about leaving home, going to a school far away, and finally living life on my own terms. But my excitement didn't last long. Liam, who was 13 at the time, started complaining that it wasn't fair I had spending money, and he didn't. Instead of encouraging him to wait until he was old enough to get his own job, my parents came up with the brilliant idea that I should give him half of my paycheck. Half. When they told me, I thought it was a joke. I argued, saying it wasn't fair. But they didn't care. They said, Liam is your brother. You should want to help him. When I tried to refuse, they threatened to make me quit the job altogether. Reluctantly, I gave in. Watching half of my hard-earned money disappear every month so Liam could buy video games and junk food was infuriating. This wasn't just about money, though. Liam felt entitled to everything I had. He would borrow my clothes without asking, mess with my electronics, and even take my car after I got my license. If I ever complained, my parents would side with him. You should be happy to share with your brother, they'd say, as if it was my duty to make Liam's life as easy as possible. They never once considered teaching Liam to respect my belongings. Why would they? In their eyes, he could do no wrong. Looking back, I don't even blame Liam entirely. He grew up being told he was the center of the universe. He didn't know any better, but it still hurt. Every time my parents overlooked me or dismissed my feelings, it chipped away at me a little more. I started to wonder if I was the problem. Was I too demanding? Was I not good enough? Why didn't they care about me the way they cared about Liam? Despite everything, I worked hard in school. I thought maybe if I accomplished enough, they'd finally notice me. I got straight A's, joined extracurriculars, and volunteered on weekends. But no matter how much I achieved, it was never enough. My parents would give me a polite, good job and move on. Meanwhile, Liam could sneeze, and they'd act like it was the most impressive thing in the world. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Angry at Liam for being the golden child. Angry at my parents for making me feel like I didn't matter. And angry at myself for still craving their approval after everything. As much as I tried to ignore it, the favoritism left scars. It shaped how I saw myself and how I approached relationships. I became fiercely independent, determined not to rely on anyone else for validation. But deep down, I carried that sense of not being enough. No matter what I did, a part of me always felt like the little girl who didn't get a bike for her birthday. By the time I was 18 and heading off to college, I'd accepted that my family wasn't going to change. My parents' favoritism toward Liam wasn't just a phase. It was the foundation of our family dynamic. I had spent my teenage years trying to prove myself to them, but nothing worked. At that point, I was done trying to impress them, and I focused on getting out. Getting accepted into my dream school was supposed to be my big moment. I'd worked hard for it, balancing extracurriculars, volunteer work, and a part-time job, all while keeping my grades up. I got a partial scholarship, which meant I wouldn't have to rely on my parents for much financial support. When the acceptance letter arrived, I was over the moon. I rushed to share the news with my parents, imagining for just a second that they might finally be proud of me. Their reaction was underwhelming, to say the least. My mom glanced at the letter and said, "That's nice, sweetie," before going back to her crossword puzzle. My dad barely looked up from the TV. "Good for you," he said, as if I'd just told him I'd finished cleaning my room. Any hope I had of them celebrating my achievement was immediately crushed. A few years later, when Liam got into a community college, the difference in their reactions couldn't have been more stark. They threw him a huge party, complete with catering and decorations. I remember standing in the corner of the living room during the party, watching everyone gush over Liam like he'd just been accepted into an Ivy League school. I felt invisible. Still, I was determined to make the most of my time in college. I got a second job to help cover my expenses and saved every penny I could. Photography became my escape. I'd always loved taking pictures, and my photography class quickly became the highlight of my week. My professor even encouraged me to enter some of my work into local competitions. I decided to save up for a high-quality camera, something that would allow me to take my photography to the next level. For months, I worked extra shifts and skipped out on little luxuries like coffee runs or dinners out with friends. It wasn't easy, but the thought of finally buying that camera kept me motivated. I even created a budget and tracked every dollar I saved. When winter break rolled around, I went home excited to finally make the purchase. I was staying with my parents for a couple of weeks, and I planned to head to the store on my next day off. But when I went to check the cash I'd been stashing in my old desk drawer, I immediately noticed something was wrong. A huge chunk of it was missing. At first, I thought I must have miscalculated. I counted the remaining money 3 times, hoping I'd somehow made a mistake. But deep down, I already knew what had happened. Liam had taken it. He had a history of borrowing my stuff without asking, and I doubted this time was any different. When I confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. "Yeah, I took some," he said casually, as if it were no big deal. He explained that he'd needed the money to buy a new gaming console and figured I wouldn't mind. My parents, as usual, rushed to his defense. "It's not like he stole it," my mom said. "He's your brother. You should want to help him." My dad chimed in with, "You can always save up again, Sarah. It's not the end of the world." I was furious. I'd spent months working for that money, sacrificing my time and energy, and they acted like it was nothing. I demanded that Liam return the console and pay me back, but my parents refused to back me up. Instead, they blamed me for leaving the money where Liam could find it. "You should have hidden it better," they said, as if it was my fault for trusting that my belongings would be safe in my own home. That was the moment I realized there was no fixing my relationship with my parents or Liam. It wasn't just about the camera or the money. It was about the years of favoritism, the constant dismissal of my feelings, and the fact that they always put Liam's needs above mine. No matter what I did, I would always come second. After that, I started pulling away. I didn't stop by for weekend visits anymore, and I avoided family gatherings whenever I could. When I was home, I kept to myself as much as possible, which only led to more accusations from my parents. "You've changed," they'd say. "You think you're too good for us now." Liam, of course, took every opportunity to remind me of how cold I'd become. "You're just jealous because I'm the favorite," he said once, smirking as if he was proud of it. The thing is, he wasn't wrong. I was jealous, but not in the way he thought. I wasn't jealous of his video games or the attention he got from our parents. I was jealous that he had the kind of relationship with them that I could only dream of. No matter how much I wanted to stop caring, a part of me still wished they'd treat me the way they treated him. But wishing didn't change anything, and I knew I couldn't keep holding on to that hope. So I threw myself into my studies and my photography. I stayed on campus as much as possible, picking up extra shifts at work to avoid going home. The less time I spent around my family, the better I felt. Looking back, the incident with the camera was a turning point for me. It was the first time I truly accepted that my parents weren't going to change, no matter how hard I tried. It hurt, but it also gave me a sense of freedom. I stopped trying to earn their approval and focused on building a life for myself. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had my own goals, my own passions, and for the first time, I started to see a future where I wasn't defined by my family's toxicity. It wasn't an easy realization, but it was the first step toward reclaiming my independence. And for that, I'm grateful. By the time Noah and I started planning our wedding, I had managed to carve out a life for myself that felt stable and fulfilling. I was in a loving relationship with someone who genuinely respected and supported me. And for the first time, I felt like I had the freedom to choose the kind of family I wanted. But as excited as I was to marry Noah, the thought of involving my family in the process filled me with dread. From the moment Noah proposed, the issue of inviting my parents and Liam became a looming shadow over what should have been a joyful time. At first, I avoided thinking about it altogether. I wanted to bask in the happiness of being engaged, to focus on planning the wedding of my dreams without the weight of family drama. But I knew it was only a matter of time before my parents called to demand their invitations. The first call came from my mom, just as I expected. She sounded cheerful at first, making small talk about the weather and asking how the wedding planning was going. But I could tell she was leading up to something. After a few minutes, she finally asked the question I'd been dreading. So, when should we expect our invitations? I hesitated, feeling my stomach twist into knots. Mom, I began carefully, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I don't think it's a good idea for you, Dad, or Liam to come to the wedding. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, her voice, sharp and accusatory. What are you talking about? We're your family. I tried to explain my reasoning as calmly as I could. I told her that the wedding was supposed to be a day of love and celebration, and I didn't want to invite people who had caused me so much pain over the years. I brought up specific instances of favoritism and how they had affected me, not to guilt her, but to help her understand where I was coming from. Her response was exactly what I had expected and feared. Sarah, you're being selfish, she snapped. You're punishing us for things that happened years ago. Liam is devastated. He was so excited to be part of your big day, and now you're breaking his heart. That comment caught me off guard. What do you mean, be part of my big day? I asked, already dreading the answer. Apparently, Liam had been telling everyone that he was going to be my best man. The absurdity of it all left me momentarily speechless. I hadn't even spoken to him in years, and he had somehow convinced himself that he was entitled to a major role in my wedding. When I pointed this out to my mom, she brushed it off. He's your brother, Sarah. Of course he assumed you'd want him by your side. I ended the call shortly after that, exhausted and angry. But the drama didn't stop there. Within hours, my dad called, picking up right where my mom had left off. His tone was more aggressive, accusing me of tearing the family apart and letting my grudge against Liam ruin what should be a happy occasion. He said they were willing to forgive me for my cold behavior over the years, if I'd just let them come to the wedding. It was a classic manipulation tactic, and I wasn't falling for it. When I refused, Liam started texting me non-stop. His messages ranged from angry to self-pitying to downright nasty. He called me jealous, bitter, and ungrateful, claiming I was trying to make myself feel important by excluding him. It was as if he had rewritten our entire childhood in his mind, casting himself as the victim and me as the villain. The final straw came when my parents threatened to cut me out of their will if I didn't invite them. A few years ago, that might have scared me, but now it just solidified my decision. I didn't want anything from them. Not their money, not their approval, and certainly not their presence at my wedding. Noah was my rock throughout all of this. He listened patiently as I vented about my family, never once trying to push me in one direction or the other. When I told him I'd decided to stick to my original plan of not inviting them, he supported me wholeheartedly. This is your day, he said. You don't owe them anything. Some of our friends, however, weren't as understanding. A few of them suggested I should invite my family to keep the peace, arguing that I might regret it later if I didn't. Their comments planted a seed of doubt in my mind, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I was being too harsh. But then I thought about all the years of hurt, the constant dismissal of my feelings, and the way my parents had always enabled Liam's entitlement. I knew I was making the right choice. As the wedding drew closer, Noah and I took extra precautions to ensure everything would go smoothly. We hired security for the venue, just in case my family decided to show up uninvited, and we password protected all our vendor accounts to prevent any last-minute sabotage. It felt ridiculous to have to take these steps, but I wasn't about to let them ruin my special day. Despite the stress of dealing with my family, wedding planning with Noah was a joy. We picked out a beautiful outdoor venue, chose a menu that reflected both our tastes, and even practiced our first dance together in the living room, laughing every time one of us accidentally stepped on the other's foot. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was creating something good, something that was truly mine. I wish I could say that the family drama ended there, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't. My parents and Liam had spent my entire life ignoring my boundaries, and I didn't expect them to start respecting them now. But I also knew I was stronger than I used to be. This time, I wouldn't let them control the narrative. This was my wedding, my life, and I was finally taking the lead. The morning of the wedding was a mix of emotions: excitement, nervousness, and, if I'm honest, a tinge of sadness. As much as I'd prepared myself to go through this day, without my parents and Liam, a small part of me still wished things could have been different. But I didn't dwell on it for long. This was Noah's and my day, and I wasn't going to let any lingering negativity ruin it. I got ready at the venue with my bridesmaids, who were the perfect blend of supportive and entertaining. We laughed over old memories, debated whether my hair should have a few more curls, and gushed over how beautiful everything looked. The venue was even more stunning than I had imagined. A picturesque garden with blooming flowers, soft string lights, and a gentle breeze that made everything feel magical. It was exactly what Noah and I had envisioned. As I sat in front of the mirror getting my makeup done, my maid of honor, Emily, suddenly came into the room, looking flustered. "Sarah, your family is here," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if they might appear behind her. I froze for a moment. "What do you mean, here?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Emily explained that my parents and Liam had shown up at the entrance, dressed to the nines and insisting they were here to support me. She said they were arguing with the security team and refusing to leave. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. After all the drama leading up to this day, I had hoped, naively maybe, that they would finally respect my boundaries. Clearly, I'd been wrong. For a brief moment, I considered going out there myself to handle it, but then I looked at myself in the mirror, dressed in my wedding gown, and realized I couldn't let them derail this day. "Let security handle it," I told Emily firmly. "I'm not getting involved." She nodded and left to check on the situation. I tried to refocus on the moment, but it was hard not to feel a pang of sadness. As much as I'd prepared for this possibility, it still hurt to know that my own family couldn't respect my wishes, even on one of the most important days of my life. Emily came back a few minutes later to let me know that the security team had successfully escorted them off the property. "They put up a bit of a fight, but they're gone now," she said reassuringly. I thanked her and took a deep breath, reminding myself that the worst was over. And then, the moment came. I stood at the end of the aisle, clutching my bouquet as the music began to play. As soon as I saw Noah standing at the altar, all my worries melted away. He looked at me with so much love and excitement that I felt a wave of calm wash over me. This was what mattered: him, us, and the future we were building together. The ceremony was everything I'd hoped it would be. We had written our own vows, and as I spoke mine, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for Noah and the life we were starting together. When it was his turn, he talked about how I had shown him the true meaning of strength and resilience. I'll admit there wasn't a dry eye in the audience, including mine. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception, which was a joyous celebration from start to finish. The food was delicious, the speeches were heartfelt, and the dance floor was packed all night. One of the highlights was Noah's surprise performance. He had written a song for me and performed it with his college band. It was such a sweet, unexpected gesture that left me both laughing and crying. But the most touching moment of the night came during my maid of honor speech. Emily talked about how she had watched me grow into the strong, determined person I was today. She mentioned the challenges I'd faced with my family, not to dwell on them, but to highlight how I had risen above it all to create a life full of love and happiness. Her words brought tears to my eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen and understood. Throughout the night, I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. Noah's family was as warm and welcoming as ever, treating me like I had always been one of their own. His mom even pulled me aside at one point to tell me how proud she was of me. "You're such an incredible woman, Sarah," she said, squeezing my hand. "Noah is lucky to have you, and so are we." Hearing those words meant more to me than I could express. It was the kind of support I had always craved from my own family, but had never received. And in that moment, I realized something. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, who love you unconditionally, and who celebrate your happiness as if it were their own. As the night went on, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. There was a time when I might have let my family's behavior ruin this day. I would have bent over backward to please them, even at the expense of my own happiness. But not anymore. I had grown, learned to set boundaries, and found the strength to prioritize myself and my well-being. Toward the end of the night, as Noah and I danced together under the twinkling lights, he leaned in and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." It was such a simple statement, but it meant everything to me. I knew he wasn't just talking about the wedding. He was proud of me for standing up for myself, for breaking free from the toxic dynamic that had defined so much of my life, and for choosing a future filled with love and positivity. The wedding day wasn't perfect. No day ever is. But it was perfect for us. It was a celebration of love, resilience, and the start of something beautiful. And as I looked around at the smiling faces of our friends and Noah's family, I knew without a doubt that I had made the right decision. The days following the wedding were a whirlwind of emotions, but the overwhelming feeling was relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't consumed by family drama. Noah and I were officially married, and we had managed to pull off a beautiful, drama-free wedding despite everything. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could finally leave the weight of my family's toxicity behind. Our honeymoon was a perfect reset. We spent 2 weeks in a quiet coastal town, far away from everything and everyone. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was exactly what we needed. We spent our days walking along the beach, exploring local cafes, and just enjoying each other's company. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. One evening, as we watched the sunset, Noah brought up something I'd been avoiding since the wedding. "Have you thought about what happens next with your family?" he asked gently. He wasn't pressuring me, just trying to help me process everything. I hesitated, staring out at the waves. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels like I should reach out and try to fix things, but the other part of me just doesn't want to. I don't want to go back to how things were." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "You don't owe them anything, Sarah," he said. "But whatever you decide, I'll support you." That was the thing about Noah. He never told me what to do or tried to sway my decisions. He just stood by me no matter what, and that was exactly what I needed. Over the next few days, I thought a lot about his question. My family had spent so many years dismissing my feelings, ignoring my boundaries, and enabling Liam's behavior. Did I really want to reopen that door? The answer, I realized, was no. The wedding had been a wake-up call for me. Their attempt to crash it wasn't just a violation of my boundaries, it was a reminder of how little they respected me. They hadn't changed, and I couldn't keep holding out hope that they would. For my own peace of mind, I needed to move on. When we got back from our honeymoon, I made the difficult decision to block my family's numbers and social media accounts. It wasn't about cutting them out of my life forever. It was about creating space to heal and focus on my future. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew it was necessary. Of course, moving forward didn't mean there weren't setbacks. A few weeks after the wedding, I got an email from Liam. It was much calmer than the text he'd sent before the wedding, but it still made me uneasy. In the email, he claimed he had been doing a lot of soul-searching and wanted to make amends. He even acknowledged some of the ways he had hurt me in the past, like taking my camera money and downplaying my achievements. But as much as I wanted to believe he was sincere, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was just another manipulation. After all, this was the same person who had tried to crash my wedding. I replied politely, thanking him for the apology, but making it clear that I wasn't ready to reconnect. My parents, on the other hand, didn't even try to reach out directly. Instead, they went through extended family, spinning their own version of events. I heard from an aunt that my mom had told everyone I was having a mental breakdown and pushing the family away. Another relative tried to guilt me into reconciling, saying my parents were heartbroken and just wanted their daughter back. I had to remind myself that this was exactly why I had created distance in the first place. My family had spent years dismissing my feelings, and now they were doing the same thing, only louder and with more people involved. It hurt, but it also reinforced that I had made the right decision. Through it all, Noah was my anchor. Whenever I felt overwhelmed or started to doubt myself, he was there to remind me of how far I'd come. "You're stronger than you think," he told me one night as we sat on our couch, the city lights twinkling outside. "You've built this amazing life for yourself, Sarah. Don't let anyone take that away from you." And he was right. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I wasn't living for my family's approval or trying to fix relationships that had never been healthy to begin with. Instead, I was building a future with someone who loved and respected me for who I was. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant learning from it and choosing a different path. And that's exactly what I was doing. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt hopeful. Because this time, I was the one writing the story.